There is a moment in certain friendships between women when something quietly changes. Not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly, almost like a shift in temperature inside the room. One day you were sitting with someone who once cried on your shoulder, and the next day you are sitting with someone who speaks to you as if she has surpassed you. Have you ever experienced that moment? The moment when the woman who once needed your strength begins to treat your kindness like weakness. Because the truth about some friendships is uncomfortable. People sometimes reveal their real character not when they are struggling, but when their lives begin to improve. And if you have ever supported someone through their darkest moments, only to watch them change the moment their life turned around, then you already understand the strange pain of that transformation. You remember when things were different. You remember the nights she called you crying. You remember the long conversations where she told you everything that was going wrong in her life. You remember how exhausted she sounded, how lost she felt, how uncertain she was about her future. And you were there for her. You listened when no one else had the patience. You encouraged her when she felt hopeless. You reassured her when she doubted herself. Sometimes you even carried emotional weight that was never really yours to carry, because that is what genuine friends do. They sit beside each other during the storms of life. But here's a question that many people never ask themselves until it is too late. What happens when the storm passes for one person, but not for the other? What happens when the woman who once leaned on you begins to rise again? Her life improves, her opportunities expand, her confidence returns, her circumstances finally begin to change. At first, you celebrate her success. You feel proud of her progress, because you remember where she started. You remember the version of her who felt like everything was falling apart, and you are happy to see her standing again. But slowly, something else begins to happen. Something subtle, something uncomfortable. The tone of her voice changes slightly. Her humility begins to fade. Her stories become centered on her victories. Her struggles disappear from the conversation entirely. And then one day, you notice something strange. The empathy she once needed from you has disappeared when you are the one struggling. You mention that life has been difficult lately. You open up about a challenge you are facing, and instead of listening the way you once listened to her, she begins talking about how well things are going for her. Her new opportunities, her progress, her success, her achievements. At first, you tell yourself she is just sharing her happiness, but then the pattern repeats itself. Every time you mention a hardship, she highlights her victories. Every time you reveal vulnerability, she reminds you how well her life is going. And slowly, an uncomfortable realization begins forming in your mind. She is no longer speaking to you as an equal. She is speaking to you as someone she believes she has surpassed. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. Have you ever felt that shift in a friendship? The moment when someone's success begins to feel less like celebration and more like comparison. Because long before modern psychology examined these behaviors, a political thinker from Renaissance Italy had already described them with unsettling clarity. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli, and although he wrote about power between rulers and kingdoms, his observations about human nature apply just as strongly to everyday relationships. Machiavelli understood something about people that many of us learn only through painful experience. Human beings constantly measure status. They watch carefully for signs of who is rising and who is falling. Even in friendships, even in relationships that once felt sincere. And when someone begins to believe they are moving ahead while you are struggling, their behavior can begin to change in subtle ways. Not always with cruelty, but often with quiet superiority. Think back again to the woman you supported when she was barely going through life herself. She confided in you when everything felt uncertain. She cried in front of you when she felt overwhelmed. She trusted you with her fears. She trusted you with her insecurities. You saw the version of her that few other people ever witnessed. The version that was unsure. The version that was fragile. The version that was still trying to figure life out. And in those moments, she appreciated you deeply. She valued your presence. She relied on your encouragement. She needed your support. But something interesting happens in the psychology of certain people when their circumstances change. Once their lives begin to improve, once their confidence returns, once their success becomes visible, they sometimes begin rewriting the story of their past. In this new version of the story, they were always destined to rise. They were always stronger than their circumstances. And the people who supported them during their lowest moments begin to fade into the background. Sometimes those supporters even become reminders of a version of themselves they no longer want to acknowledge. And that is when the subtle distancing begins. The conversations become different. The warmth becomes weaker. The respect becomes conditional. Until one day you realize something painful. The woman you once comforted now speaks to you with quiet condescension, as if your kindness toward her was evidence that you were beneath her, as if the patience you showed was a sign that you had nothing better to offer, as if the compassion you gave freely was actually proof of your weakness. Machiavelli would not be surprised by this transformation, because in his famous work, The Prince, he described how people behave once they believe they have gained the advantage. They begin to display it, sometimes openly, but often through small signals of superiority. They emphasize their position repeatedly. They highlight their victories. They subtly remind others of the difference between where they stand now and where others stand today. And the most painful part of this transformation is how your kindness begins to be reinterpreted. The patience you showed when she was struggling, the emotional support you offered freely, the understanding you gave without judgment, all of it begins to look different in her eyes. Instead of seeing generosity, she sees weakness. Instead of seeing loyalty, she sees submission. Instead of seeing compassion, she sees someone she believes she has surpassed. This is where Machiavelli's most famous observation about human nature becomes important. He once wrote that it is safer to be respected than to be loved, because love without respect can slowly turn into contempt. And when someone begins to believe they are above you, they start testing boundaries in small ways. A dismissive comment here, a condescending tone there. Advice that feels more like criticism than concern. Words that sound helpful on the surface, but leave you feeling strangely diminished afterward. Have you ever experienced that kind of conversation, where someone claims they are only trying to help you, but their words carry an undertone of superiority? Sometimes they even say things like, "You should take this constructively," or "I'm just being honest with you." But honesty that humiliates is rarely guidance. It is often dominance disguised as truth. And Machiavelli would recognize this tactic immediately, because it allows someone to position themselves above you while appearing morally justified. They present themselves as the wiser voice, the honest advisor, the person who knows better, while quietly reinforcing the idea that you are beneath them. But the most important realization in this entire dynamic is something deeper. Success does not create character. Success reveals it. When someone is struggling, they seek support. They value kindness. They recognize loyalty. But when their life improves, their true perspective on the people around them often becomes visible. Some people rise and remember who stood beside them. They remain humble. They remain grateful. They remain loyal to the friendships that supported them during their lowest moments. But others rise and begin looking down, not because they were always powerful, but because they are finally experiencing a position they once envied, and they want to hold on to it, even if it means redefining the people around them, even if it means placing distance between themselves and the person who once saw them at their weakest. So if you have ever experienced this painful transformation in a friendship, if you have ever supported someone through their darkest season only to watch them change when their life improved, understand something important. You did not lose a friend in that moment. You discovered who she truly was. Because the most revealing moment in any relationship is not when someone needs you. It is when they no longer do. That is when character becomes visible. That is when gratitude either survives or disappears. And the next time you find yourself sitting across from someone who once cried on your shoulder, someone who now speaks to you with quiet superiority, do not feel confused. Do not feel ashamed. And certainly do not feel defeated. Because sometimes the greatest mistake people make when their lives improve is forgetting the people who stood beside them when their lives were falling apart. And when someone begins to treat the friend who lifted them up as someone beneath them, they reveal something far more important than success. They reveal their true character. And the question you must quietly ask yourself is not, why has she changed? The real question is something far more revealing. Was this who she was all along? Because sometimes the person who believes she has conquered you has only revealed that she was never truly your friend in the first place.